Okay, good evening. Thanks everybody for coming. Tonight we have the Director of Public Works with us, Joe Lynch. We don't have our chair, Lee Michael. He is severely under the weather with a case of significant pneumonia. So we'll hope he gets better soon. And we'll press on tonight without him. So the first thing on the agenda is to approve some meeting minutes from February 9 and 11. So I would take a motion on that.
I move we approve the minutes from February 9th and 11th.
Second.
Any questions? Nope. All in favor? Great. It's unanimous. All right. So that gets that piece of business out of the way, Joe, and we'll get you home soon. Maybe.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So right off the bat, I need to not so much apologize, but acknowledge the fact that we had something dramatic happen at town meeting last week that you were all witness to and party to. And that is we created the stormwater utility and an enterprise fund to go along with that. So it's very similar to the water and sewer budgets in years past. Stormwater, presuming the Attorney General approves the actions of town meeting, which is usually pretty straightforward, will be coming off the main DPW budget and standing it on its own as its own separate enterprise. So the budget I had submitted back when we needed to submit them, and I was one of the last to submit them, by the way, simply lumped all of the stormwater costs into the general DPW. So the summary sheet that I've worked in the past to provide you folks with includes stormwater in it. So right off the bat, if we're looking at a total DPW contingent budget on the order of $4,573,032 submitted, we need to, because of last week's action, need to back out of that number $628,219, which is the stormwater total of the contingent budget. In a very similar way, on the non-contingent total DPW, as submitted by myself, was $4,334,340. And last week, action takes the non-contingent portion of that budget, $508,996, and subtracts it from that total. Not trying to confuse matters, but actually it's on the contrary. We were trying to prevent confusion. The vote of town meeting last week was to give a clear definition of what the town's intention was with creating the utility and the enterprise, because going into the annual town meeting, those budgets will stand on their own and they'll simply come in as the budget, neither contingent or non-contingent. They're just going to come in as the budget, and then the selectmen will vote rates accordingly. So, that's a quick summary of what happened last week and the impact of what happened last week.
So, in case anybody's following along on their laptop, or not, the summary sheet, the summary budget for all the DPW divisions is divided into personnel services and general expenses. And what we're talking about here for stormwater is coming out of the non-contingent budget, because we also have to balance a non-contingent budget, is this $177,000 for labor.
The labor piece, that's correct.
And then also down here, $331,000 for general expenses.
That's correct.
So because we're setting up a stormwater enterprise fund that will meet the requirements of the first year of the mandate, we are going to be able to fully fund it without an override. And that means that the fund itself will start, with a requirement for revenue to balance the expenses, general expenses of $439, and a higher labor expense of $188. So, plus some indirect expenses, that we'll be allowed to bill to the stormwater fund.
Correct, but in this budget, since we were not yet enterprise, we didn't include any of the
Right.
indirect costs.
Which is fine. Anyway, so those are the things that come out of the DPW budget because of that. And makes life a lot easier to balance the overall budget on a non-contingent basis. And then, of course, as Selectman Hurley announced, anything that's coming out of the contingent budget will therefore lower an override request by that same amount. So that's good news on both fronts. And it's good news that we're getting out, I think that we're getting out in front of the EPA requirements by setting this up. I think it was a great thing.
Very, very exciting. It was trend-setting, to say the least, and got an awful lot of phone calls last week with, wondering how it is we were able to do it. And, people looking for guidance now, and I don't have enough time to give it to them. And, other communities looking
Right.
to do the same thing.
Well, I don't know how many other communities have how many other communities have tax-exempt institutions that own 16% of the impervious surface, but we do, and so there's an opportunity to spread that cost, which I think is great and fair. So yeah, your budget. The DPW budget comes down right away, but there's some related questions to that move. But,
Sure.
but I don't know, I think you had a laundry list of stuff from the subcommittee and Steve to go through.
Yes, so Steve sent off, Steve McCurdy, who's the subcommittee chair for the DPW functions, has sent off a list of items for me to consider and provide answers to. And Steve, you can either ask a question, I can read your question and give the answer to it.
Yeah, go right ahead, Joe.
So,
It's all there.
just in a general sense, Steve asked us, on the non-contingent budget, what services would be reduced or eliminated under the non-contingent budget? So, if, I suppose if the override didn't pass.
Correct.
Correct. So right off the bat, we would probably cut the yard waste collections from 16 weeks per year to 8 weeks per year. We would, though some of that's probably absorbed by stormwater, so the impact may not be as dramatic in the end. We'd eliminate the recycle center, which is open one Saturday a month, year-round, but at considerable cost. The household that has this waste collection system that we reinstituted 6 years ago, we probably need to come by the wayside. We really would have to start looking at those services, particularly snow plowing services, that we provide on private ways that have been burdensome, and really the town's policy has been to provide those services to them, but literally they're not really eligible to be included in your regular budget. So those are the sorts of things that we're looking at, but we're trying to minimize the actual impacts to the folks that felt at home. But there are going to be some. There are cost escalations that have happened, and if we can't cover them, we're just going to have to cut back on some services. We got a generous gift from the Copelands that we hoped to use as a catalyst for planting more trees over the next couple of years, and that might come by the wayside. The Copeland's gift will not be compromised whatsoever. That gift is solid, and we will spend every penny of the money to plant those trees.
So let me understand this. If there was an override effort that failed to pass, and you were relying on your non-contingent budget, these are the areas that would suffer?
Those are target areas. Nothing's been cast in stone yet.
Okay.
I mean, there are some other subtleties that become political that need to be considered. I mean, the two sides of the budget is the cost part of it as well as the revenue stream supporting it. So there could be some discussions about raising sticker revenue for solid waste to maybe offset some of those other types of programs.
Because you really can't reduce your hazardous waste effort, the household hazardous waste, because that's part of the stormwater.
That's correct.
Right.
That's correct. I mean, some of it is and some of it isn't, but I've included what's eligible in the stormwater within my stormwater budget. So how would you eliminate a part of the program? Close the gate at 10 o'clock instead of noontime? Doesn't make sense.
No.
So,
No.
Joe, the other half of that question was whether the contingent budget would allow you to add any services beyond the baseline that you're at now.
And again, without confusing the issue, the only added services we were really putting in there was on the stormwater end of things. The contingent budget was to really cover escalation, product costs and supply costs, but no new services, with just simply level service equal to what we've been providing in the past, covering those additional costs.
So there were some cuts then that are out of supplies and equipment and that sort of thing. Is there anything that should concern us more than any other in terms of, how well the equipment is kept up, or whether you have, your guys have time to work on equipment and vehicles that aren't DPW, and what the, kind of fallout or follow-through cost that creates?
Yeah, boy, you asked many good questions, all in that small little question. And the reality is as our fleet ages, the preventative maintenance and the major repairs become more frequent and more costly. Item one, and our fleet is continuing to age. Item two is that, I've said in the past, and I'll continue to say again this year, I have an issue that we wrestle with, which I call fleet creep, where other departments are in fact, successfully getting new vehicles through various means, through and whatnot, yet they don't have any budget, and they don't need to have any budget to maintain those. I pay for their fuel, I maintain their equipment, I inspect their equipment, mostly vehicles, and that's another department taking on a new vehicle. Wouldn't it be great if your neighbor bought a car and gave you the bill to maintain it every year? Well, that's what's happening in some of these other departments, and the more I've raised the question in the past, it doesn't fall on deaf ears, but I think people are just afraid to grab the third rail for fear of what it might unfold. From a fleet creep perspective, we're seeing increasing costs in fuel, increasing costs in maintenance that are completely uncontrolled and not capable of being controlled by me, because I'm not making the decisions to buy those vehicles.
Darnell, you had a question.
When you're talking about the, non-contingent budget, you said a number of things. Are we looking at any personnel? And I didn't hear any personnel mentioned in trimming, trimming the budget back and everything?
We're not trying to, but depending on how catastrophic it becomes, everything would have to be on the table. I'll readily admit that we're understaffed and below staff levels to provide even the services that we're supposed to provide, never mind when the emergencies hit. So we would try to eliminate staff as a last resort, but when all essential programs are the only thing that's left, you got to make considerations for things of that sort.
And another thing about what you call your fleet creep, we run into that same thing as part of our technology, or as we upgrade technology across the town as well. You see the same thing where you buy a new piece of software and it's like all the support get pushed into IT, and you're like, okay, it's not one of those things we have a static budget on. And I think that's the same way we have to deal with the new cars and everything else, is look more of the true cost of that purchase.
Yeah, great point, and I'm not sure if I'm too proud or just it just makes good common sense. Our department's pretty technology hungry. We're running some pretty powerful programs, and we're buying our own hardware, we're buying our own software, we're paying our own support. So it's not as though we're buying these greatest and powerful technology applications and turning around and dumping them on IT. And it's the opposite mindset of what's happening with cars. We are carrying our burden on our own and doing it willingly. It makes sense.
But I'm saying we have to figure out the true cost going forward. When we do make those purchases, address those issues in that purchasing process of, where's the maintenance and upkeep in this, and figure out if you might even be able to pull together like an idea of like, this is what the typical cost of maintenance on this car or that car, whatever, just so you have a running number or some type of idea, so we know where to
No, and
pinch budget's at.
I don't want it to even sound like that I'm attempting to bash my colleagues in the other departments. It's not the case, because when you get down to the budget level, the town's paying for it one way or another.
Right, and it's
Right.
true, and I'm saying.
But on a level
it's-
funded budget, if my burden keeps escalating and my budget's staying exactly the same, it's affecting my ability to deliver services. So
Exactly.
that's what
No,
I'm saying.
No, I'm saying exactly, but you have to defend your department, and that is some cost that you are not controlling. For other people make those decisions, so you have to bring it out, so we know.
So just to put it in perspective here in terms of the DPW budget, last year the budget was $4,334,352, and this year the non-contingent went down $12. Nobody else's budget did anything remotely the same, okay? So we wish everybody was as thrifty as you are, Joe, but we do worry that, if we were to try and live on these non-contingent budget submissions, we'd be in trouble.
That's correct.
And the main difference between the non-contingent budget submission and the contingent is here in general expenses, and it's, well, there's two of them, and it's mostly in the stormwater number, almost all of it. There's about 30 grand up here in DPW general, out of $1 million. So it's minuscule. So yeah, I guess the other problem with your aging fleet is that now you have to garage it outdoors
Becoming more necessary to do that.
because of the,
We lost 4 bays.
You lost 4 bays
One building
last winter.
Last winter.
right. So that can't be helpful
No.
for aging of the fleet.
In other things like those trucks that are outside that are diesel, most of our large fleet is diesel. We have to plug them in at night, so we're adding in electrical costs, just keeping the cores warm so that they fire up when we need to go out. So that's an added expense you wouldn't otherwise do if they were indoors.
Right. Well, at least the fuel cost is down a little bit this year, but, or was it on a contract?
You bought it on contract.
But the interesting thing is, we were actually looking at the futures market today, and we're likely to make a bulk purchase this week
Okay,
at a very, very favorable rate. Very favorable rate.
great,
About half of what we had under the last contract.
nice.
Joe, is the fuel and the work that you do, maintenance for non-DPW vehicles, something that you have software to track?
The answer is no. I mean, it's not that complicated, but I think we tried to price that out back when we were looking at the work on a software tracking program, and it was about a $30,000 application. We have limited space and limited capabilities in our garage to use that at this point. We do keep manual records, but there's not as simple as, generate a report. And not all other departments can be lumped into the same category. I mean, the police department does in fact pay their own fuel bill. The school department pays their own fuel bill. But we maintain all the police cruisers, so the biggest expense is, tires and maintenance and collisions and whatnot that we bear the expense on. Park department, on the other hand, takes care of all their own stuff, and this is, as does the cemetery. They pay their own fuel, maintain their own equipment. It's only the major stuff that comes out that they just can't handle that we help them out with. But every other department, I dare say, whether it's inspectional services of water, health, or the fleet car that's here at town hall, I mean, every last bit of that, all of consolidated facilities, we pay most of their fuel and all of their repairs.
And they don't come down and help you fix up your house? I mean, your
I got a bill for
office?
$66
Your
today
office.
for roofing repair supplies, and I looked at it coming down from one department, for me to sign off on my share of it, which is 100% of it. And I'm looking at the $66 bill and I'm saying, my roof caved in last year, you haven't even acknowledged it.
Oh, well. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, the bulk of the questions that I had were about the revenue side. I couldn't tease out what you were expecting for water revenue, sewer revenue, trash sticker revenue, recycling revenue, that kind of thing, and so that we could fit in to the whole picture of, where are we, the expenses of that stuff versus the income on that stuff.
So the water and sewer revenues are tracking pretty well with the forecasts that were made for FY '16. Solid waste revenues are almost, not almost, it's completely driven by sticker sales revenues. There is no recycling revenues anymore. In fact, on the contrary, we're in the midst of some discussions regionally, just to put into perspective how global our local initiatives can be. All of the recycling processing centers in New England are shutting down. So even though our vendor who collects our recycling, they cannot process it for $15.30 a ton, which is our contract price here. The place that they bring it is going out of business, and all the other alternatives that are out there are looking for $45 and $50 a ton. So we've got a very dramatic situation that's brewing because of lower oil costs and lower energy costs being what they are. It's actually cheaper for these folks to make paper and plastics from scratch rather than recycle. And even for the past 5 years, most of our recycled commodities, whether they were metals or plastics or papers, were all going to China, and they're making nothing. So the end market's dried up, and the processing costs are going to be pretty dramatic over the next couple of years.
So does all that
So we're not
recycled
only not
material
getting
become
revenue,
trash?
we're not getting revenue anymore, we're actually going to be paying more to process.
The same as or less than you would pay for trash?
It's still less, it's still,
Still less.
yeah, it's still, let's say ecologically reasonable, because they can speculatively accumulate these materials until the stockpiles get so big that they have to do something with the mountain. About 15 years ago, they were burying them in landfills in the hopes of mining them back out. All plastics in one corner and all papers in another corner and metal, and then mining them back out for when the market's improved. We may be facing that as a society pretty soon. We're not riding into this storm alone. We've got a whole posse with us. We've got a group of communities that work together. We have our DEP technical assistance folks helping us, solid waste technical assistance folks helping us with this picture from a regional perspective. We're all facing the same thing. It's not just, no way is it unique to Milton.
And our collection and disposal contract runs until
2019, June of 2019.
2019. And are we spending tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars above the sticker income on the collection and discard of the trash?
Yes, but I'm going to be more specific, Steve. The total solid waste program is funded about 50%, almost exactly 50%, by tax levy and 50% by sticker revenue. We've also been pretty comfortable in looking at stable number of tons, give or take 2 or 3% per year of municipal solid waste and recycled solid waste. We're looking at pretty stable numbers. So, our sticker sales haven't tracked off appreciably.
When's the last time the stickers went up, Joe? Do you know?
I've been here 7 years. They've been $3 for the entire time. My understanding was 10 years ago. Prior to that, they were $2 for a long time.
I found some of those the other day. I was told couldn't use them.
So is any of the discussion with the selectmen about the sticker income going on, or is it just?
None. It's silent.
So,
Sorry, Ted, just about what is the cost? You said 50% is from tax levy, 50% is from sticker. So just to share with the audience what the total cost is, that half of which is tax levy.
Unfortunately, my budget broke down in sub-budgets. Collection of refuse, transfer and disposal, solid waste general, and curbside recycling, all as separate lines, so I have to do the arithmetic together.
okay, I just did it. It's $1,383,000
On the levy?
in the non-content. Yeah, both budgets on the levy. Yes. But against that, we get the trash sticker fees.
Yeah.
Okay. And so those are, they've been running, well, back in 2010, almost $1 million, but that's been dwindling, and it came up to 895. So,
That wasn't just trash sticker revenues, that was trash sticker, and as Steve suggested, that was also recycling revenues. You used to get paid for taking
Okay.
paper, but that isn't happening. That market softened
Right.
to the point that it's gone. So it's probably,
but it says that, what I have here is that trash and recycling fees combined for fiscal year 15, just finished, is 895.
that number is correct, because that's
Okay.
after the market softened and we were no
Right.
longer getting
Right.
recycling revenues back.
So the difference between $1,000,004 and $900,000, so $500,000 is what trash costs the town on the general fund,
Right.
as opposed to being paid for by the users specifically. Does that sound about right to you, Joe?
It's right with one caveat, and it's that we pulled out the yard waste and household hazardous waste, which used to be part of solid waste, is now in stormwater. So we pulled some of those expenses also. The ratio is more favorable, looks more favorable, because it doesn't include what traditionally and historically has been called solid waste in the past.
So some stuff that was covered by general fund, that was a stormwater function, will now be covered by stormwater user fees.
That is correct.
So that takes it off the general fund a little bit.
So let's say, when we say some, that number's, round numbers, call it $200,000, $211,000.
Okay.
Of what was solid waste is now in stormwater. So that
Right.
brings that number closer to 50%.
So that's why you're remembering 50%, because it was about 1.6 and 8, and now it's about 1.4 and 9, so.
Yeah.
But I guess the point is, for 2017, we have a $500,000 gap of services money the town doesn't have to provide other services, because they're going into trash, and then in 2 years hence, unless the recycling market rebounds, the costs for the recycling removal is going to go up, and the cost of trash is going to go up, and it could be considerable.
Yep.
Fiscal year, 2 years, that's like fiscal year
The
19?
2019, is that one that?
So the
contract
conclusion,
goes?
so fiscal year 20
Okay, so
is when we
fiscal
run the
20.
risk. We have a big
Yeah.
risk come the next contract cycle. And, when the contractor we've been working with was able to give us very favorable rates because of something extremely unique. He simply lost a piece of Boston. He had trucks parked for 2 days a week, which he could make available to us at a discount.
Right, but
We've enjoyed that for
so if in the
well, for
interim,
next 2 years.
peg a little bit of an increase, then you avoid having to like double or triple the cost of a sticker all in one fell swoop. That would drive everybody bananas. So I think that's something we gotta keep an eye on closely. And I mean,
What-
given that it hasn't gone up in 20 years, I could live with paying
Yeah.
another dollar on it now.
The, and I understand your point clearly, and it makes a lot of sense. The one thing I make sure everybody understands here and at home, who will may be watching, is that it's not enterprise, so those funds go to the general fund and get, anything you generate in surplus will simply get declared as free cash. They don't stay with solid waste, all right? Because we are not enterprise, and I'm not sure there's a stomach to do that, but I guess we haven't explored it. So, you would be raising those additional monies each year only to get it declared as free cash, which over time doesn't distribute back into the solid waste program, distributes across.
It still offsets the
Well,
cost.
it would only be distributed back as free cash if that revenue was under budgeted. If you peg the expected revenue higher, then it just goes into general fund and you can budget expenses against it. Of course, then the problem becomes what happens when you've budgeted other expenses against it, and then all of a sudden you actually need that revenue for the solid waste.
That's my point, is I don't think you wouldn't be amassing some monies in speculation of what happens in 2020.
But the point is, if it goes from 3 to 4 to 5 to 6, people get a time to get accustomed to it. You'll get time to incrementally, you'll get time to figure out what that does to the amount of trash versus recycling versus people taking the stuff to their office to get rid of it because all of a sudden, the sticker is $10 out of nowhere because everything has gone up so much that,
I misunderstood. I thought you were saying increase it to a level 1 now,
No.
and let it start later on.
Incrementally, right.
Incrementally increase it. I understand that.
And eat in at that.
Well, that'd be great, in a way.
I'm guessing
This
that,
conversation's happening just at this table. This has not happened anywhere at the administrative level. I recognize that it has been, the question was asked, how long has it been like that? It's about 10 years. We haven't changed it, and maybe it's something that's worth discussing.
but when it was $3, it was probably covering most of the cost of the solid waste. Now it's covering half. That's the final point I'll make on that.
Yeah, because it'd be good to look back and see, okay, when it went from $2 to $3,
What was the percentage?
how much was the general fund covering beyond that? Maybe zero. And now we're covering $500,000. So it might make sense to move that up. Was that about it
Yeah.
on that
think
round? We've got more questions here for you, Joe, but I guess one of the ones that isn't on either of your lists is can you fill us in on the personnel situation? The simple question is, have you filled your engineering vacancy?
Just approved town meeting last week, Thursday night. So we've got personnel board approval, we've got selectmen's approval. The person gave us notice on Friday, and we'll be here a week from Monday, a week from this coming Monday.
Great.
Yep, so the answer is yes.
Good. So that takes care of that. Now, on your contingent budget, you have 3 new positions, 2 in administration and 1 in operations. Am I right?
That's correct, but
Okay.
I actually made a correction at town meeting floor the other night. That's what I submitted in my budget.
Right.
The personnel board
Took out one of them.
took out one of those positions, the junior civil engineer,
So one of the administrative positions.
one of the administrative positions, kept the one labor position and kept the one environmental coordinator's position.
Okay. So I guess I'm gonna skip to a piece of my question number 3. Those positions, you were looking for those positions to fulfill the requirements of the stormwater mandate?
Partially.
Below 7%?
It was at the
Partially?
7%. It was at the 7%. So funding for the environmental coordinator came from 2 pockets. One was some solid waste savings because of the new contract, and the rest of it was rolled into solid waste. So the vast majority of that one position was coming out of our savings, the program savings. The staff engineer and the labor position, the truck driver laborer's position, we're funding completely out of stormwater. One of those was the one that didn't approve. So what we're looking at is I think it's about a $7,000 difference between the contingent and non-contingent.
Okay, we're talking about 177,957 here, up to 188. So
It's about, is that
on stormwater. Okay, so 11,000.
11? But I think when you
Whatever.
take the other position out, we take the one that wasn't approved out, it pulls it down closer to something like 7,500.
Got it. So you need to make those hires in order to fulfill the mandates of the stormwater division and have the labor available for that?
Yes.
Okay. However, you're only charging the stormwater division 7% of all salaries.
Well, they're not going to be doing that exclusively.
Okay.
And so I stand corrected. 7% of the total effort of the entire department goes into stormwater. It's not individual people.
Right.
Though sometimes it's funded by individual people doing the function. But
Or at least those new hires will take the pressure off somebody else who was maybe doing some of that.
that's correct.
Okay. So you're comfortable that the labor requirements of the stormwater will be fulfilled if you get these two people, and if you can allocate 188,000?
That is correct.
Okay.
And that's not to say, Personnel Board's vote was to not approve the position because they didn't have sufficient information. I took it to mean that they were soliciting more information from us. I've since learned they don't want to hear any more information. They're not inclined to improve the position. So that other person that they didn't approve, was contributing some effort to us, doing inspections and meeting the burden of the permit, and, that's going to mean it's going to be shifted into, additional burden on our existing staff in order to meet it. I thought we made a compelling argument. I guess not.
Well, I hope, I guess you can't go ahead and hire these individuals until
We can start the
have the funding.
recruitment process. Actually, if we're dealing strictly with a contingent, non-contingent budget, not enterprise, I'd be very concerned. But I think now that we've put it into an enterprise and we've put it into a separate utility, I think we can start the recruitment process in anticipation of someone starting, in early July.
One of the positions, or both?
Both.
Both. Okay. All right. It's just, in a way, the math is funny because you're looking to hire $100,000 worth of, or more of folks,
But only
but
putting.
the stormwater only goes up 7-8 grand, so how does that compute? So,
Because some of the effort of meeting those things that we do in stormwater are already being provided by current DPW employees.
right.
Like
So-
I said, it frees up the burden for those folks to do the other 93% of their effort on those other functions.
Right, but it is still an additional burden above and beyond a non-contingent budget.
I do hear, I hear what you're saying. I still think we're confident we're able to do it. I'm less confident not having the third person. And the budget on the salary and wage piece of it, I looked into, things like overtime, actual expenditures and overtime and try to get pretty realistic and absorb some of that in non-overtime costs and just in regular employee costs. What these numbers are silent on is there are obviously indirect costs having a new employee. There's benefits packages and whatnot that obviously add in. Like I criticized earlier, that hit other budgets and I really didn't give that much thought.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Group health takes the hit. Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, but,
All right. So that makes that pretty clear. So why don't we jump back to my list? Unless
Steve
anybody's got
had
something.
one other thing on his list.
Oh, okay,
If you don't
sorry.
mind, just because it maybe help answer some of the other ones down below.
Good.
So Steve asked how much do we spend on roadways and how are those annual pavement management projects selected? And
Okay.
So my answer is simply.
All right, should we take a break now? This is going to be another half hour here. Here we go. Go ahead.
Pretty straightforward.
Right.
Two sources of money. We have a Chapter 90 allocation, and we have what it is that the Capital Improvement Committee can give us on any given year that they can afford to give us. Chapter 90 apportionment this year has reduced, but the number this year is,
Okay, so,
622 is what they've given us this year, which is about 30% less than what we've gotten in years past. This year, my understanding is Capital Planning Committee has recommended an additional 400,000.
Correct.
So it's close to the million. To the second part of that question answers further, why it is that the money is what it is. We have a pavement management system program, which basically catalogs every single street and gives it a condition index. And based on a whole set of criteria, we come up with the most vulnerable, worst deteriorated streets in a priority. And we look at the life cycle, and we should be spending between 1.3 and 1.4 million dollars a year just to maintain status quo. But we're not. We're spending 20% less than that, so in essence, we're...
So 1.3 above our
Total.
allotment total? Okay.
So historically, we're getting just our Chapter 90 allocation, and we've been able to go to the capital planning committee in recent years, and they have infused some additional funds. Sometimes light, sometimes very good. They gave us $1 million 3 years ago to Central Avenue. If you remember. So, I think the goal is to recognize that it's there. So selection of the streets is driven by that one application. The other end of the spectrum, we have a sewer capital program, we have a water capital program, and our GIS and our own brains meld those together, because what we want to do is replace the most vulnerable water mains, the most leaky or deteriorated sewer mains, and then those roadways, have them aligned with the worst pavement conditions, and those become our target programs for 5 years out. And we revisit that every 3 years and push that horizon further out.
Okay, I got Betty,
So
and then
can you just
Darnell.
comment about how do you know about the water mains? I mean, I certainly see that they have breaks and they're reported on social media, but do you have a system of knowing which water mains are the oldest and which need to be done?
So we just did, every 5 years, we do a revisitation of our water master plan. This 2 years, year and a half ago now, we redid our entire 10-year master plan. So we went down, we did a complete model, not getting too technical. We modeled our entire system, we looked at all of our leak history, and we looked at all of our ISO fire flows, and we went out and did confirmatory. And with the model, we were able to determine what type of flows we're able to get in. So your first priority is providing clean water. Thank God we were able to do that. We've got a great system, we've got a great water supply. But on fire flow perspective, we're finding that we have deficiencies in being able to meet ISO, Insurance Services Underwriters Organization. And it's those areas that you need to concentrate on first. And aside, we've been doing about 3,500 linear feet, just shy of a mile, of water main service replacement a year. At a real aggressive year, we'll do 5,000 to 7,000. We should be doing 15,000 to 20,000 linear feet of water main per year over the next 10 years, just to catch up. Not break even, just to catch up to where we ought to be. So we have a water issue looming.
So will you say that again, what we're doing and what we should be doing?
That's correct.
Will you just say it again? The whole-
So we're doing between 3,500 and 5,000 linear feet of water main replacement a year. On a good year, we do 7,000. Last year, we did 15,000, but we also convinced the folks in town to float a $5.4 million bond for water main replacements, tanks, and that PRV valve. But our master plan shows that we ought to be spending that 15,000, spending enough money to do 15,000 linear feet of water main replacement
So
every single
double
year.
what you do in a
Almost
really
triple.
good year.
Triple.
Triple.
So just to follow up on that, and we're going to get to this later, because if you have the numbers and we're solid, we can vote the recommendation. But generally, we've been voting for water, about $500,000 of appropriation, and and we get 0% financing from the MWRA on that. Is that right?
That was approved.
No.
No.
The program changed.
Two programs for borrowing under the MWRA, and
Well, Article 22 last year, we borrowed $500,000. So I'm hoping for water, and it was $485 for the sewer.
so 500,000 was
500,000.
appropriated as capital outlay within the budget itself, supported by rates itself, correct?
No. No.
Oh, 500, yeah, I'm sorry, I stand corrected. The number used to be bigger, but the new program, the LWC, Local Water System Pipeline Assistance Program, has done several things. It decreased our funding per year, but it pushed it out for a reliable 10-year period in $500,000 increments per year.
Okay.
It did that. It also took I'm trying to get the exact number here. It allowed us to get 0% loan. There is no grant whatsoever on the water program.
On the water,
No
right.
grant, it's just 0%. That's how they lend their money out there. On the water, on the sewer side, it's much, 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 much more attractive. And I know we're just talking water, but if you indulge me for a second, on the sewer inflow and infiltration, they've increased the program to $914,000. That's double what it was in prior years.
Wow.
They took the loan program, which used to be a 45% grant, 55% loan. It's now 75% grant, outright gift, and we're paying 25% of that back in the form of a loan, which is also at 0%.
That's huge.
It's a
That is
very
huge.
attractive program. The
Because
truth-
last year it was $485,000, and it was a 45% grant. And now you're telling me it's $914,000, and 75% is a grant
On sewer.
on sewer.
On sewer, that's correct.
But still, and you can give us,
So what that's going to do as we work through our water and sewer budget, it's going to probably allow us to readjust how much we're contributing out of our rates themselves, to maybe allow us to do less sewer work, relying more heavily on the NWRA program, and in comparison, to allow us to maybe perhaps increase the water. I haven't had this conversation with the selectmen yet, but, they know that the rate at which we should be spending money is triple what we have been. And I made that pitch to the Capital Improvement Committee was that Friday morning, Steve? I think it was just last Friday.
well, infrastructure is important. It's, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's,
It was just to say, the buried infrastructure you can't see, so it's hard for people to understand that. So, and as a result, we have a sewer capital program in master plan, we have a water capital program in master plan, and we have a roadway master plan. And with those documents, we are able to come in and ask various groups to understand and then hopefully fund.
Darnell?
Yeah, a question for you. Because I think when we come to this point in time in histories throughout the town, and we look at overrides, it's always operational budget overrides, it's, save job overrides. But there are other underpinning things that need to be done throughout this town to maintain the town as we like it to be. And I don't think we address those enough or talk with these things enough. And one of them are the roadways and roadway plan. And realistically, we're not even holding on with the numbers that you just gave us. The 900,000 that you just spoke
We're
about. is
losing 20% ground every year.
and have we put together a real plan to say, it may look ugly, but this is what we need to be doing to address the roadway problems? Because to say, okay, we're following the sewer, sewer systems or the water pipe, replacement. Well, if your block happens to be one of those blocks that get worked on, that's great. But if your block has never been one of those blocks, I'm sure there's a lot of folks around here that are looking at that and saying well, that's great, but it's never getting to me. It's never getting to our block. And, I'm tearing up axles and everything else. And I know you try to patch as much as possible. We spoke about in the past how you want to, when you redo a road, you want to get down to, the deep dirt or whatever, to the concrete patch and then put another patch in. That's going to give us that 25-year or whatever life with maintenance on these roads. But I'm saying, is there a middle ground in which we cannot have to say, okay, we're not going to get all the way down here because it's not going to happen, but a way to stretch our dollars so that a lot of these roads can get worked on that haven't seen any real road work done in, I've been here 20 years, so 20-some years and stuff. So I'm just is there something out there? Is there some numbers out there that, people, we need really to see and understand that this is what it's going to take to be realistic and not say, you're number 3 on the list and that's 8 years away and we may get to you?
Sure. So I heard, I think, 3 major points in that comment. So the answer is on the first point is, yes, I make that argument make that presentation to the capital planning committee every single year. They're fully cognizant of the importance of our pavement management system, our master plan for pavement. They understand what it is that we need to be investing each year, and they put that into the context of all the other pressures from other departments for other things town-wide, and they make those difficult decisions. But I make the compelling argument as best I can, and they're aware of the numbers.
The capital committee is
Capital
aware, planning committee is aware of those numbers, but I'm not seeing any of those numbers being addressed as we approach, looking at, okay, this is an override and this is something we need to be, I'm not hearing that message get out there that this should be a part of that, or be looked at in that.
I've never had that discussion with the capital
You know what I'm
planning
saying?
committee.
So that's what I'm saying, I'm not hearing that, and that's as important as what we're doing with a number of the other departments and stuff across the town. It's as important, so if it's not getting out there, there's no pressure on our selectmen to include it, is, I guess, what I'm saying. So we need to investigate and try to make that happen as well,
So-
and bring that to light.
The roadway is absolutely fair game, it's non-enterprise. The conversation with water and sewer can't be had because they are enterprise and they're not.
Yeah, I know, I'm
subject to
talking
Prop 2.5.
about road surface, and that's definitely what I'm talking about.
So, no, we haven't had that kind of conversation at all with the capital committee or with the selectmen for that matter. The other point I thought I heard you make in there is life extenders and these middle ground or middle of the road types of approaches.
Right.
So our pavement management system, which gives us our capital plan, we don't like going out and spending all of our money on full depth reclamation. So if you had heard me say that in the past, it's because we need to sometimes. But the reality is, your money is far better spent, and we did this for the past few years now, going out and doing other treatments. On roads that are only 10 years old, you might go out and do crack sealing for a fraction of the cost, but you might extend the life of the pavement another 10 or 15 years. Well spent early on. And there are a whole bunch of incremental processes that you can do in between to extend roadway life at a lower cost. The problem is the highly deteriorated roads are so high and so great. It's a risk, or it's a temptation to do only those, but I don't think you're serving yourself well, which is why we've gotten back down to, let's do some of these lower ones every single year and still do the lion's share of the expense with roadway reconstruction. Because these other ones we're doing out here, you're gonna feel those benefits 15, 20 years down the road by hopefully reduced expenses because we've extended those lives. So the program does both. Our pavement management system looks at both.
So Joe, before we leave the subject of roads, when you say we're losing 20% every year, 20% of what? Against what?
So we're not investing 20% of the money towards what we're doing theoretically on those highly deteriorated roads. We're not doing 20% of the roads we ought to be doing to just maintain status quo. So as those roads get deferred, work on those roadways get deferred, they themselves become vulnerable to accelerated deterioration and therefore maybe even cost escalation. So not only, it's not linear, we're not losing 20% every single year, 20%
This year.
becomes 21, becomes 22, and incrementally, we're losing that much more ground.
Because typically we were getting about 600,000 from Chapter 90 funds. And it's only been in the last couple of years, aside from Central Avenue, that we've been able to add anything to that. The last year of the Val Patrick administration funding, we got a bonus.
One-time windfall.
It went up to 933,000. That was great, but if you say we need 1.4 million a year, and we've typically been doing 600, maybe a million if we were able to supplement it, like this year. To me, a million out of 1.4, that's more than a 20% shortfall. So I was just trying to figure out how that math squared up. But if we lose 20% against a 20-year plan every year, is that what it is?
Well,
So therefore, we're getting further and further behind And so if you put in a new 20-year plan, you'd have to spend even more in order to get through it, right?
It's like any master planning document, you can't pay particular attention to anything more than 10 years out. You shouldn't pay any attention more than 10
Right.
years out. 5 years is a reasonable forecast. But what you want to do is look at the overall picture, because it gives you that horizon that you need to be aiming for. So
But the
we
last-
looked at, and we did look at every inch of roadway in that light.
Was that 10 years ago, 5 years ago?
No, it's not. I was just going to say that was, I think we're coming up on the 5th year, so we're about into our 5th year revisitation, which is good, because all the data's in, all the mapping, all the algorithms are built. It's just a matter of going out and reevaluating the pavement index.
Okay, and I guess the other thing, oh, sorry, I don't know who's first, Michael, and then Darnell.
Yeah, this road conversation is really fascinating to me, because it sounds like, you have a good plan to coordinate it with the sewer and water main replacement. I'm just wondering how to, the best way to explain to the public what the trade-offs are with, maintaining the roads that were paved well. Is the horizon you talk about, is it 20 years? If you do one strategy with maintaining the roads that are already in good shape and extend their life, what would the overall cost be? How can you bring that down, as opposed to, having to be forced to dig down deep? That's one question. Is there a report that shows that, or a graphical?
It's a report. It's voluminous, but we have that report. Some folks on this board have seen that
Have you seen
in my
it?
office.
I've seen
I think Donnell has, right?
I've seen it. Yeah, but it's just like, you look at, again, it's like, the best way I can put it, and I know it's not reflected, Joe, it's pie in the sky, a lot of it, because it's like, we don't have the money to do it, so to know what we should be doing and stuff, and what should be getting done, and then you're not getting it done.
Well, yeah,
It's kinda like-
I'm sitting here listening to this, and I'm just wondering, how can I educate myself as to what you should do, what's the smart thing to do with the road budget? Because I don't follow it really, honestly,
No, it's not, it's just that
Spend it all.
we don't have the money
Is the thing to do
in the
with your road
budget
budget.
to do it.
to what?
It's like you said, if every year you're like anywhere from 400 to 600 behind staying even, 600,000 behind staying even, just even to where you should be. You're 600 behind that. Then next year you come up, you have that work plus the work you didn't get done. So, and you still have the shortfall on the next year. So you're constantly running,
What I'm gathering
running
from what you're
behind. And
saying,
that's what I'm saying.
Darnell,
It's
is that we should be putting a little more money into the roads, because if we
Yeah, and
don't,
that's-
then it means
that's
it's
exactly what
being
we're talking
stupid in the
about.
long run, because we're going to spend more money fixing them later on. And I just kind of wanted to see if there's a way to tease that out and make it digestible for somebody who's just, So if you got that report, can you share that with me? I'll try and take a look at it.
I just saw it when I went over when we were over doing
It was a couple of years ago. It's the same
We went
document that
around,
we work
yeah.
with. I mean, you're more than welcome to take a look at it. Putting it online, it's unwieldy.
It's-
It's just huge.
You don't know what it looks like.
It's huge.
You gotta have
I don't know what it
somebody
looks
explain to you.
like, but I'm curious about it. And then the next thing I was thinking about is like, is there any kind of, this list of streets that we have to work on, is that like public knowledge at all, or do we put that out there saying like, I mean, the thought that crossed my mind was, like, when's Bunton Street going to get paved? And it's just a little street,
What neighborhood is that?
Bunton.
Bunton.
Forget it.
Very important street to me.
Hold on. What year is it? What year is it?
I think the last was paved in 1900.
It's 16.
I know where
It's
it is.
16 now, so 32, 35 maybe.
Say that again?
I said, oh, that's optimistic.
It's actually-
2032 maybe.
Without causing alarm, it's actually one of the areas of low fire flow, and it's actually not Benton itself, but that general area is going to be seeing this year's water work, which theoretically means if we're in doing water work, that general neighborhood sees pavement work the very next year. They go hand in hand, but not Bunton itself perhaps.
So my question is, I'm sure everybody watching would like, when's my street getting paved? Is there a way to say, we're looking at Bunton Street in, 2 years? That's awesome news. I'm very happy, if that's true.
The answer is every segment of roadway, meaning like the long roadways, we're not just saying Brook Road, block by
Gotcha.
block. Every block is a segment. Every segment of roadway has a pavement condition index that goes into an algorithm that puts in functions like, the roadway classification, the average daily traffic it sees, the degree of degradation. So every single roadway segment, from number 1 to number 600, I could tell you where you stand. Pay no attention to 600, it's too far down the road. But it's the folks who come in and they have the genuine question, and I say, it's number 35, and by the way, that puts it like 9 years down the road. I get discouraged.
Is that
But
how
it's
you,
out there.
how do you access that information? By calling up the DPW and asking the question?
Or if we put this voluminous report, it would be nice if people could page through it.
Maybe
but-
we hit the top 10.
Okay, I'll stop asking questions, but I don't have, I'd love to get the answers some way, or,
The answer is yes, those folks can call, and we will look at it, we can look it up, but, no.
well, I'll write you an email or something and ask for that voluminous report,
Oh. Wouldn't the simplest thing be to just put the next 100 streets or segments on a list, on a link, right on your website? Currently proposed paving project in order.
You say currently proposed, or the top 100,
The top 100.
Yeah,
Whatever way you want to put it. Then if people don't see their name on that list, they go, oh, well, I'm going to die before I see my
We still know.
let's see, again, it's, then the dollars were assigned there, then you have to do the arithmetic in your head. Those folks at home are gonna say, well, good, I'm number 35. They're not gonna see that those dollars leading up to it are in fact, 9 years worth of just Chapter 90 money, or what does the capital. So it really kind of tells the story of how much you need to invest in it to be able to answer the question, when does my road get done? It just tells you where you are numerically,
Of course.
and that there's $22 million worth of work ahead of you.
But, I mean, you could put it out at, okay, here's the top 100, and at current, the double spending, it'll take 15 years, or something like that.
Good chart.
I don't know. Jean, you had a question.
Yeah, well, I think what Joe is saying is it's an unknown. You can't get there from here.
No, you stand corrected. I think what I said is it's known, and it's discouraging information.
Yeah.
And we've got a horizon looming out there, and our goal is to get to that horizon, but it just keeps getting further and further and further away. That, I think, is what I'm saying. It's very much known what we should be investing. And the capital committee is aware of that, and they, they struggle with how do they prioritize that against other things.
Okay, so then Darnell, when you were saying earlier, that when we were talking about an override, that these things are not getting done, but they're not apparent anywhere, so that when you're talking about an override, we're talking about current issues that are not being resolved, but there are issues like the trash, like the water, like the roads that are not getting done. So should that information be public, so that people say, well, yes, that's
Yeah,
what
no,
I'm
no, so,
trying
no,
to
but
make.
yeah,
Sometimes
and-
my case.
and-
Yeah.
no, I'm saying, but the same thing, and I want to bring this up, because we had a 5-year plan presentation. And in that 5-year plan presentation, one of the things that was definitely left out was road work. There was nothing in there for that, and we said, oh, we had a $32 million shortfall in,
Yeah.
for bringing the town up to where we needed to be and doing all the things. And they did not even include capital in that, and that's like,
There was
It's
just
not
debt
really-
service at the current levels,
No.
that was the only that was
Yes.
forecast, right,
Yes.
Ted, I think?
yeah, so I'm saying, so the thing is, so again, it's left out of the conversation, but for the person in the town who doesn't have, say somebody who's, say, in the school system, who's just saying, okay, where's my pound of flesh in this override system? In this override, and we can say, they're definitely getting police, so understand this. In this override, I want people to understand that we need more police, we need more fire, we need to cover for these people, so that we do need this override. I'm telling folks, so hey, in TV land or whatever, we do need this override, and it's more than just, a couple of extra teachers, even though we do need them as well in covering our costs. But I'm saying, a part that's not talked about is roadways, and people
Right.
drive around those on their road every day. They beat up their cars every day on these roads, and they're like saying, yo, can somebody fix these? And that's a part of it, and it should be brought up in a conversation because it is as important and part of that.
Sure.
Conversation should be had and stuff. So that's what I'm talking about, and I talk with Joe about that all the time, and best he can with what he got. But
Exactly.
unless in our leadership here in the town makes it a priority, he'll never get more. And that's a part of it.
And I've been careful to draw the line between giving the information for folks to make the, be informed to make the right decision or make the wrong decision, to make the decision, period. I don't envy the capital planning committee one bit. I mean, they understand, they work with policies and they, with total indebtedness as a ratio of, budgets. I mean, they've got a very, very clear policy that they try to adhere to, and then within the framework of all the requests coming in, they try to look at the forecast of debt service over the longer term and making sure they're staying within those policies. So, I know that their effort is tough. So that's working with debt service as part of your normal operating budget.
Yeah, just like,
There's an argument that could perhaps be made that, not unlike a school building, it may be debt exclusion. You might look at the course of rebuilding all the schools within a 5-year period and investing X number of dollars. Well, maybe you invest a certain amount of monies over a 5-year period under debt exclusion to accomplish regaining ground to the extent of at least we're going to gain a little bit over the next 5 years.
and that's exactly
But
the
those
conversation.
I haven't had those conversations with anybody until
and
just
it's
this moment.
Well,
Right.
the thing that would be a shame is if the information wasn't presented to the public in a way that we wind up spending more on roads than we would otherwise, had we seen what was going on.
We
It's
did
in
it
the
with
whole
schools. We did it with schools. We let them go and die for 30 years, and then,
Yeah.
by the grace of God, we got a deal. But that's about it.
Jonathan, you had a question?
Yes, Joe, you painted quite the picture of our roads, our sewers, our water system. And I'm curious, in the best of all possible worlds, and I realize there's a million moving pieces here, but what would we need to spend on an annual basis to bring our maintenance in those 3 areas up to a reasonable level where we're no longer falling behind and perhaps even getting ahead?
So you don't mean maintenance, you mean in capital and reinvestment
Well,
to
yes,
improve.
Maintenance and improvement, yeah.
Yeah.
How big a chunk is it?
Well, we know it's that $1.2, $1.3 million a year in roadways, on a recurring basis every year that we should be spending. That's not in addition to what we have, but that's what we should be spending. Sewer, we're actually in pretty good shape. We're staying ahead of our master plan with our II funding levels. So we're in good shape on sewer.
That's infiltration, inflow.
Flow and infiltration.
Okay.
Sorry. I
But
use
you use a lot of
acronyms
jargon,
and
Joe.
acronyms that, unique to our industry, I suppose. But that number is about $800,000, $900,000, let's say about $1 million a year in our sewer reinvestment. And then on the water end of things, we have about $800,000 to $900,000 a year that we are currently spending, and we ought to be spending 3 times that. So we are probably closer to $2.5 to $3 million a year that we ought to be spending on water. Now, water is a direct impact to your water rate, and your sewer is a direct impact to your sewer rate. So in the context of the general operating budget, this conversation comes down to that big question of the roadway system. That shortfall is between $400,000 to $600,000 now, and only getting worse. So, you probably want to add a couple of percent above that just to try to regain some ground. You don't want to stay even. You just don't ever get anywhere. So we're probably looking at an additional investment every year of between $800,000 and $1 million. over and above what we currently have.
So I just wanted to mention that there are some towns that actually put roadway funds into their operational budget. They do not rely on the capital procedure for these funds, because it's like police cruisers, you know you're going to trash one every year, so might as well have one on the budget every year, that kind of thing. And I think this is probably something we really ought to think about, you know, put a $500,000 or whatever for roads into the operating budget. And the only way you get that is through an override. But I think if we haven't, that plus the Chapter 90 money plus the occasional capital that you might get might keep you even, you know.
Unreliable every year.
Unreliable,
Yeah.
but the Chapter 90 is somewhat reliable.
Except they reduced it by 30% this year,
Well, that's because it bumped up 50% the previous year.
over the past 2 years.
It went 600, 900, back to 600, right? But at least if you had something built into the operation budget, it would be reliable if it didn't get whittled away, you know.
That conversation has not taken place with any folks other than just at this table now.
Well, that conversation has to happen, and it should happen in the context of a potential override, because that's when you can have an operating bump. And so we'll try and advance that, because I don't see any other way out of this mess in terms of roads. Like,
Ted, you're talking about this now, wouldn't an alternative to putting it in the budget be taking advantage of the historic low interest rates we have now? And do a debt exclusion, you know, add this into an override and borrow the money now to do this job, because you're never going to get a better interest rate.
There were communities 5 or 6 years ago when the economic turndown was even, the interest was a little bit higher, but the demand for construction work was nil, and the contractors just wanted to keep busy. And there were some communities that went out and just did windfall projects. They floated the debt exclusion override and went out and did, 10 years worth of work in 2 years. Tore the town to pieces and caused huge disruption, but got the work done. So right now.
So that's the downside. First of all, you don't
Right
have...
now, the climate is, no contractor's hungry. They're all very busy, and we're seeing, cost escalations on construction projects between 7% and 8% year to year. And, years before, we were seeing de-escalation on some contracts.
So the fact that you can get interest, you can borrow the money for whatever it is, 2% now,
2-ish, yeah.
as opposed to 8 or something later on, it's not worth it, you don't think, to try to go for something to, to...
well,
Municipal bonds, were we ever paying 8?
Long time.
Long time ago, yeah. But
in the 80s.
Yeah, well, okay, well, another question about like historic changes is everybody knows the price of oil has dropped through the floor, so,
but liquid asphalt hasn't.
oh, well, okay.
So the paving costs haven't dropped down.
Well, compared to these millions of dollars, the fuel budget, that you're going to be buying some future oil stocks, but you only spent like $105,000 on fuel in the budget last year or so. It looked like.
I don't, hate to say I don't have those numbers.
The significance of the gasoline bill for the town is not that,
New road.
is not that big, right?
Of-
Compared to roads.
That's correct.
So if you were to, how is this all going to work with buying, future stocks and oil? You're going to buy some futures for next year or 2 years down the road or something?
So what we've done in the past is we've bought barrels. We basically, last time around, 2 contracts ago, we bought 50,000 gallons of diesel fuel and 75,000 gallons of gasoline. When that locked the price at a certain price, and that locked it in. And we lived off of that stock for a while until it was gone. But now they're not even allowing you to buy blocks anymore. They're basically buying what's called a cost adders on top of market. So they're hedging themselves by giving you a bandwidth of where the market's going to be. There's just 3 fuel markets that they track: Opus, the NYMEX, and one other. whose acronym escapes me right now, but that plus an adder, and those adders, the only thing that's locked in is the adder over a 1-year period for the next 3 years.
So, okay, so I'm just trying to think, you're gonna buy a contract to be able to buy oil in the future at a cheap price?
Yeah.
No, because the index is gonna change daily. So they're hedging themselves, because as the index rises, as fuel prices recover, all we're doing is locking in that additional adder that they add in, if you will, their profit and overhead. It's not as attractive. If we were really speculative, if the market still allowed us to go out and buy 50,000 gallons, I'd be buying 100,000 gallons at today's prices.
Yeah.
But they're not gonna
You
let you
don't
do
have a place to put
it. Because they aren't gonna store it for one, and two, it's like basically, yeah, you might buy 100 barrels, 100,000 barrels today, but they're gonna sell you those barrels on tomorrow's dollars, and they lose money, you know, if they do it that way. That's why they're not letting you buy barrels now, because they figure like, hey.
So,
So there is some savings, I suspect, in the longer term, as the market goes through the one fiscal year that we're looking at. Where it's gonna go in 2 years, I don't know. Where we are right now, I never would have expected numbers to come down that fast to where we are today.
So Joe,
Which is why we're looking to at least lock in on the adder.
And the total value of the savings is like in the neighborhood of what?
Within my department, when I'm buying fuel, I'm buying it for water, for sewer.
Yeah,
And
good
next
thing
year
you
we
are,
start
you're getting a good deal.
stormwater. Probably total about $50,000
Okay.
over the course of the 2-year, 3-year contract. So, you know, let's say spread it out evenly. At best, you can do like $20,000 a year.
so,
We've seen the savings,
binder
we've seen
payment
those
for
escalators.
I was wondering if we could buy enough of it to pay for the roads, you know, and it doesn't sound like it's gonna work.
well, the big chunk of your expense on the general fund is in the vehicle maintenance budget, and that is the 105,000 you saw
In fuel.
in fuel. And so, no, we're not gonna save millions out of 105,000. But it'll help. So roads. Do we have any other questions on roads aside from maybe, you know, who will pursue, who should pursue the idea of putting it into the operating budget? We should, with the selectmen.
yeah.
We got that government studies committee around, so.
And you're going to find out that your road is 19th on the list?
It was. It's been 19 on the list for like 7 years now.
Problem is, you got a beautiful water main.
Oh, not on Blue Hill Terrace.
They're
When,
fixing it.
when's that coming?
So,
You've got a good water main.
I know.
so we're talking capital appropriation articles right now, basically. Do we have the numbers? We could actually vote those.
So this is the capital
So,
for water, for example.
well, let's start with the roads. Do you have the number that we're going to get, 622,000?
Yes, the apportionment is 622,060.
Great. 622,060.
For roads.
Okay. One more place. Jeez.
21.
The water, MWA borrowing.
Okay, so this is not Article 21. This is Article 21 from last year. So I don't know what it's going to be
Ted, I
this year.
apologize, I gave you a number, but on the Chapter 90, I'm reading one document, I'm reading a second document. The actual final allocation is 622,978.
978. Great. At least it went up.
Need money.
That's good. $900 in about half a minute.
So can we look at what you need for an operating budget for the roads and then what you would need for a capital budget to keep ahead? I mean, could you break it down in that way?
I'm not prepared to give those numbers I don't know what those numbers are tonight, so I can't give them to you. What I do know is what, that number I just gave to Ted, that is our apportionment under the Chapter 90
Okay.
allocation that the town meeting has to vote in order to accept.
So,
And CIPC added 400 to it?
right.
What I'm looking at.
Unofficially, did the selectmen endorse that at this point?
As far as I know.
Well, that was a recommendation made to the selectmen, and the selectmen accepted the report. I don't know if they're, I don't know what the technicality is there. We have it.
I've heard that number being bandied about, and,
And yeah, I've got it on,
okay, so 400,000.
400,000 is the recommendation.
So that's gonna come in as its own, I think it's gonna come in as its own CIP article.
It's going to be part of Article 6.
Itemized, right?
Article 5, I forget, you know. The first spending article.
So that piece
in the
is covered
warrant.
under that.
Right, right. So Betty,
But if we were to think that we want to put this on the operating budget at some point, you know, make that
Okay.
suggestion, it would be good to kind of have those two numbers so that people could look at that.
well, we know that in order to avoid losing ground, we need to spend 1.4 million a year, okay? Right now, we have $1 million. We're gonna lose ground,
Yeah.
okay? If there was a way of putting the difference into a permanent operating budget so that one would only have to raise $1 million through Chapter 90 and capital, and you always had that $500,000 of, you know, reliable operating.
Operating budget, yeah.
That's the
Budget, that
conversation
would be great.
that needs to happen.
That
Yeah.
With the
conversation
selectmen and
needs
the
to
warrant.
happen. But in the meanwhile, we do have an appropriation article here. It happens every year, and this will allow the treasurer to borrow this basically and then get reimbursed.
That's correct.
So,
I would make a recommendation that we approve it's the roadways budget of 600 whatever thousand as written.
great.
Second.
Any questions? No? All in favor? Unanimous. Good, that's our first article in the warrant passed. And we've got a couple more. Now, Article 22 is the water system. Now, just to be clear, you said we needed to spend $2.5 million a year, and we're spending right now $500,000.
100,000.
So that's 5 times more than what we're doing. But you said in a good year, well, in a basic year, we're doing 3,500 to 5,000 feet of pipe,
That's correct.
and we should be doing 15 to 20. So 3 times that, as opposed to 5 times the money.
No, it's four
that-
times the money, not five.
No, because we're voting authorization from the MWRA under their program to use $500,000 of their money,
Correct.
which I think is the article you're talking about.
That's right.
But also built into the water department, much as the conversation just centered around
right.
roadways, built within the water budget is water capital outlay, which
Right.
allows us to infuse some more money into that.
Additional.
Right. But together, those two allow us to undertake that 3,500 to 5,000 feet a year. So
Oh,
it's
those two
3
together?
times those two together.
Okay. How much is that, the water enterprise fund piece of that?
Don't believe I have that number. I can check.
Okay.
I don't know if I have that number with me today or not.
That's okay. I heard
I don't think
Tom
the
Hurley
plan
telling,
Either.
I heard our selectman telling somebody at town meeting that, oh, no worries, we're going to set up this stormwater enterprise fund, and it will be reviewed just like any other budget by the warrant committee. And last year was the first time that the water and storm enterprise funds were set out separately.
Became enterprise funds.
And we don't have those budgets finalized, or obviously the stormwater yet either. So, but eventually we will get those.
Stormwater you will by extraction, but you need to add in the indirect
Right.
costs.
Right.
This is just an FYI, my operating budget for water, my operating budget for sewer are in fact complete. It's waiting for, debt service and the indirect costs
Right.
to add into that. So
So we're looking at water. Man, I tell you, any supplies, we're going to have to refine those terms, aren't we? $150,000 of any supplies. I love that one. So in the water, I mean, we do have the water department operating budget piece. We just don't have the
don't have the indirects,
indirects.
don't have
and
capital outlay.
capital and stuff like that, but that's really not, we're not really worried about that.
That's what I just wanted to be
You know.
clear, because as we were talking about the warrant article authorizing to borrow that $500,000, that's just the one piece of it. That's just
One piece of it.
authorizing to borrow $500,000 through the MWRA program.
Right, that 500,000 doesn't finance the 3,500 to 5,000 feet of line that you do. It's part of the financing for that.
It's a little less than half,
Oh, okay,
yeah, but I don't have the precise number.
all right, well, that's all right. So currently you're doing about $1 million. Okay, that makes sense now why you need 3 million. Okay, because you need to triple what you're doing. Wow. That's daunting.
Well, and what's daunting is that we also just, again, looking at cash flow from the debt service perspective, we just are in the process of completing that project that's $5.4 million in authorization. We're paying just some bands in FY17, but in FY18, it's going to have, being simple, it's about a doubling effect on the debt service line for water, without talking about additional funds. Now, we also did an awful lot of water work. We did the 15,000 feet of water main for the first time ever that I can imagine. We replaced 3 tanks with 2 brand-new tanks, so we did an awful lot of
Is that
work.
whole project finished?
Nope, the PRV valve is done, the water main work is 100% complete. 1 tank is in and commissioned as of last week, and we're waiting to ride on that tank for getting telemetry and electronics to run right. Waiting to run for 2 weeks on its own, and then we're gonna start demolition over on Big Blue, literally in the next week or 2.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's great.
we have until December of, this coming December to finish it. We'll be done, we'll be out of there by July, 100% complete.
And then Canton and Milton will be forever separate
Yeah.
Friendly divorce.
That's correct.
in terms of the water.
And as of last week, the Blue Hill Ski Area is now a customer of ours and not Canton's. And
Oh.
so we're already getting new customers.
Oh, great.
So the article for 500,000, the 500,000 still is the 0% authorized amount from that program with the
That
MWRA?
is correct.
Okay. So I don't have to change the number on this article from last year.
That's right.
And certainly we want to
This is-
approve this, so
And this is the water?
this is the water. Capital's
Article
appropriation.
20, that's 22 or 21? 21.
This
It's
is
gonna
Article
change.
22 from last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't know what it
So-
is, right?
But it's the same numbers.
Same.
Same language,
numbers.
nothing's changing, same program.
Same program.
Make a recommendation.
I move that we approve Article, whatever number it's going to be, for $500,000 at 0% is written.
I
Second it.
Okay, thank you. All in favor? Excellent, unanimous. Okay.
It's the Local Water System Assistance
Have a cookie.
Program.
That's okay.
Okay.
That
Now-
number, this-
I'm going to skip ahead to the equivalent one for sewer, okay? This is the local financial assistance program for the infiltration inflow program with the NWRA. And is it still the same for 85? No, it's 914.
914. 914 this year.
All right.
Go up, man.
Okay.
It's a big
That's
money.
right. Big changes. This is good news.
New money, new money.
This is actually, this is a phenomenal program.
Phenomenal money, number.
Now, to couch that, we're paying that through our assessment, so we're paying them money that they're only turning around and loaning back to us.
Yeah, but
But give it back.
they didn't double our assessment,
No. No. And we're doing a great job,
doubling this.
we're doing a great job with our II removal, so we're actually reaping some benefits by our flow share reductions. So not only are our assessments dropping down, but our flow shares are dropping down as well.
Great, which will help us on the assessment.
Right.
Right.
In future years, right.
So,
Filtration and inflow.
So the language on that article, I'm not able to see it from where I sit, Ted. I don't know if it gets into the breakdown of grant versus loan versus
it does
interest
not.
rates.
It does not.
Okay,
It,
because it changed.
no, it doesn't change, it hasn't changed. I mean, the recommendation hasn't changed from last year aside from the numbers. I will tell you that I think it was last year, or maybe 2 years ago, that I first started putting in the grant portion into the comment, because I thought it was good news. People ought to know. You know, we're, not only is it zero, but we're not paying all of it, so this is, anyway, so I don't know why it
So
hadn't.
just to, I had said it earlier, it's
Published
75% of the total is a grant,
Yep,
25% is a loan.
Zero
What you
credit.
used to have to pay back in 5 years is now a 10-year payback at 0%. So they've extended the payback period as well.
oh, didn't know that detail. Okay, that it was 5 years before and now 10.
Yeah.
10-year payback, great. It's better and better. So, this won't be Article 24, although it might be, but we won't call it that. Can I have a motion?
I move we accept article number, whatever it's going to be for, is that 914,000?
914,000, sorry, I could make that bigger, couldn't I?
Yeah,
Make it
right.
smaller, Ted, now it's harder for me to say what I'm moving here.
Okay.
914,000,
There we go.
okay. I move we approve this article to appropriate $914,000 to finance capital needs for the sewer system, as written.
Second.
All in favor? Excellent. Unanimous, thank you.
It's not that easy to do.
Okay.
Good.
All right, let's go back to that one piece that is part of stormwater capital, one piece of capital appropriation that goes to stormwater. That's the surface drains. Okay, this is not enabled by any MWRA program. This is money out of our pocket. And the Capital Improvement Planning Committee has recommended this year $300,000. So, but it shows up in this article separately as opposed to the laundry list of other items that the Capital Improvement Planning Committee usually has for us. So last year was the last year of a previous 10-year master plan for surface drains, is my understanding. It was $500,000 a year for 10 years, and in the last 3 years of the program, it was underfunded by a total of
600,000?
$800,000, $200,000 the first year and $300,000 each of the last 2 years. So it ended up being a $4.2 million program over 10 years with decidedly less investment in the last 3. So this would be the first year of a what?
So we've actually not moved forward with updating our master plan, because what we wanted to do is wait to see what this new permit does look like. You know, are we including items that we should be included, or have we excluded things that this new permit requires? So we didn't move forward with it yet, so, you know, part of it will be, part of moving forward the stormwater program from a budget perspective is to update the master plan. The need to go out and do physical work every single year to the extent of, you know, $500,000 is there, it's real. We could do that every single year for many years to come. I didn't know that the Capital Planning Committee authorized, recommended $300,000. Certainly something we can work with. We'd like more, but the truth be told is, you know, just getting out of the first year, getting out of the gate on the first year of this new permit, it's going to be a lot of effort, and, you know, putting a $300,000 project out is probably something we can do pretty readily.
That-
Good.
And that 300,000 comes out of the recommended bonded, so
Yes.
there's no impact on the 17, and then unless there's some bans. But it would be on the 18 budget, and the debt
Right.
service would be allocated to the stormwater utility.
That's my understanding. That's what we
That's
talked
what it
about with Tom when he was here. So that would be,
That's the debt service side of the equation to the treasurer's office, correct? We still need I think we still need a parallel appropriation in order for me to spend it, which I think is the other piece of what this
oh,
article
absolutely. You
accomplishes,
need
right?
the appropriation, no question.
Right.
The question is, when does the stormwater enterprise fund start picking up debt service? Okay? Right?
Yeah.
And my feeling is it starts picking up debt service on things that newly hit the debt
Right.
service schedule in fiscal year 18,
That is correct.
okay?
So you
Which
shouldn't
is
be
what
seeing
this
debt
one would
service.
do,
Correct.
Right.
okay? Which also frees up $300,000 on the general fund debt service schedule for
Potential.
this year,
Right.
for town use.
Right.
But
That I'm less clear on, nodding my head on.
that's okay,
That's right.
It does, yeah?
Mhm.
yeah,
Okay.
that's
Yeah,
all
because the
right.
capital committee was waiting also to see what happened before meeting to vote on
Okay.
any changes.
So don't spend it all at once, Steve. Anyway,
Bunton Street.
right, there we go,
Thank you, Steve.
maybe roads. So,
Right behind Blue Hill.
so,
Just circles getting up there afterwards.
7 years.
one of the things that
It was done.
One of the things that was interesting this fall when Jim McAuliffe came in and told us about rescinding old debt and things like that for the fall town meeting was that we realized that a lot of the surface drain authorizations hadn't been issued. And so now you have issued some of those, that backlog.
The construction
correct?
project that's going out this spring for this summer's work will spend every penny of that. So this $300,000 that we've just, going to ask
Right.
town meeting to appropriate will be new work in stand on its own.
So is there some benefit to bunching those several years' worth of appropriations?
So on the stormwater projects, what we looked at is we had 3 roadway areas that had very similar circumstances, very similar problems, and we wanted to get the water work done out of the way first, get the gas company to come in and replace their gas mains, and then build them into our roadway rehabilitation program so that we could come in and do those entire roads, get the drainage systems in place, get the sub-drains in, use. The answer is, part of it was economy of scale, the other part of it was really just logistics of coordinating all the projects together.
Right, because there's a lot going on down there, and you need to, I mean, it's never perfect, you never have the right amount of money to go forward with
If I knew that
everything that
3
needs.
years from now, I'm gonna need $2.7 million, I wouldn't be asking for 300,000. I'd wait and get it all in one
Right.
year. It's never gonna happen.
Right.
So we have to amass it to fit the projects.
Okay, so this is the surface drain article, if I can find it, Article 20. Great, okay, so now, we need to change the other 2 to a 3, because it's last year. So this is 300,000 for the surface drains.
Make a recommendation that we agree with the appropriation of $300,000 for the capital, it's to the capital, right? The
Yep.
capital committee, and the recommendation in this article as written.
Second.
Great, all in favor? Super,
Thank you.
that's
4 articles.
That's 4 articles done, but we have one more article. But before we get there, can I just ask you, in a follow-up to the Fall Town Meeting presentation? Oh, and by the way, that Fall Town Meeting presentation on the DPW yard, that's available on the town meeting page, okay? As opposed to the DPW page.
We had it on both.
Oh, I couldn't find it on the DPW page. But it's on
They
the
move
town
things
meeting.
around.
Okay, it's on the town meeting page, but anyway. So where do we stand with the quote, "next step" of providing $675,000 for preliminary engineering?
So we made a request through the Board of Selectmen, and the committee, made a request to the Board of Selectmen.
Yep.
They made a request of the Capital Improvement Planning Committee. Is that the actual, is it? Capital Improvement-
CIPC, Capital Improvement Planning Committee.
With all the documentation, they had all heard the presentation, and quite frankly, my understanding is it just, didn't meet the pressures of their funding capabilities. They did not fund a penny of it.
So is this preliminary engineering something that makes sense to bond? Doesn't, does it, really?
No,
No.
I mean, there are some things we need to do to continue to gain momentum, but, again, it was a.
No, but in terms of financing it, if you went out to bond this, it would be, what, 3 years or something?
It's not atypical.
I'm not even sure it's bondable.
It
Not
is
even
bondable.
bondable.
It's part of the cost of the project, you can
It's part of
recommend.
it, but if there isn't a real project, that's the catch-22.
So,
Okay.
you wouldn't do it if you weren't expecting to build a building, and then you can wrap it all in there.
So what we did was, it was a master plan, high-altitude vision.
That was great.
Create
Great.
a feasibility study.
Yep.
Create a feasibility study, because, folks need to know that, this isn't a $1 million question, this isn't a $5 million question, this isn't a $100 million question, but in the overall realm of what we've discussed and given the needs, this is what we think the number is. But there's still, it's a planning number. So things like environmental assessments and preliminary engineering and design development, taking it up to that level is that number that we've asked for, to be able to better answer the question of, what
are we looking at?
What is the real project, and when might we consider it? So if we don't, we got out of the gate with a feasibility study for $35,000, we got a lot of value. But we didn't get precision that we're gonna need to answer the bigger question. I'm not even sure the DPW study committee even existed at the point they made their recommendation to the selectmen and to the capital planning committee. Their function ended at the presentation at town meeting. So they really
Right.
didn't even have any standing, but nonetheless, they, as a group, sent a letter off and requesting that it be moved forward. But I agree with Steve, it's a big number. It's no real project. And, I feel that we were competing against other departments with very similar needs, and they seemed to have more momentum and was able to get at least some of theirs moving forward. But nonetheless, I think many on this committee have toured that facility and walked away with a jaw opened wide and couldn't believe what they saw.
Well, if you want to see a horror show, go look at that presentation again.
Get that. I'm surprised it's still standing
it's,
after last year's snowstorms. Any of it.
Impressive.
One of them isn't.
We
lost a roof.
I'm surprised, like I said, I'm surprised we didn't have more gone after the end of last year's snowstorm.
So chapter,
And then when we went through it, that building's gone.
Yep. Okay, so speaking of snow, how are we doing this year?
To be great.
Well, it's middle of February, and I would hope to say we're
Don't say it.
waning.
We're about average snowfall.
We're
right now.
about average. We're about average. We've spent about $295,000,
Okay.
on the books right now. We haven't seen all the bills come in, but that's where I've been tracking it to be so far. Our salt barn is 80% full, so the salt deliveries we've been getting on all year, all season long, have been keeping up with where we were. So we're pretty much status quo on the salt part of it. So I think that number's looking pretty good. It's going to be probably 350 thereabouts come the end of the year. Knock wood.
So,
I do remember the April Fool's song storm
Storm, yeah.
several years ago.
oh yeah, yeah. A lot of trees came down then.
We lost a lot of trees last week
Yep.
as well. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, same.
Your crew was fabulous.
The day before it was
Pulling dead, broken branches and deadfalls right off the side of the road and putting them in the chippers and everything. The next day, it was great.
Started, well,
was
the first
terrific.
one was the Friday, which I think was the 5th.
Yeah.
And we went right through that. We went through Saturday of that day, and then all of last week,
Yeah, it
just
was
clearing
great,
debris.
because
We're
I
still
had-
picking up stuff.
Yeah, I had one come down, almost across my driveway. It was great.
I'll pass that along. Yes.
No,
to
I
them.
really appreciate it.
You work hard.
So, there's a weird thing about snow budgets in the state of Massachusetts, which is that once you raise them, you can never lower them. Right, we're at 150,000, which is I think the lowest you're allowed to go for a municipality. And so every year there's a problem because 150,000 was this limit that was set, I don't know how many years ago, how many decades ago this was set, but everybody says, okay, we should only budget 150,000 a year for snow. So then you have to scramble or make sure you have enough in your reserve fund or something to cover the difference between the actual costs and the 150,000. It just seems, I understand why it's been done this way, but it just seems a silly way to continue doing it if even in the small years you're averaging 300,000. The average years are 300,000. Well, maybe you ought to at least make your snow line 250 so that you're not scrambling for that 100, even if you're scrambling for hundreds above. At least you have a small step against, the reality of the situation. So, isn't it, I think there was only one year in the last 10 where we came in under $200,000. Do you have a handle on that?
Yeah, the cliche, it's become a cliche that I use, is that by the time we prep all of our equipment,
Yeah.
things that you need to do with the plows and things you need to do mechanically with the trucks to get them ready for winter, and fill the barn to its brink,
You've spent it.
it's gone.
Right.
And a snowflake hasn't fallen.
Right.
It's Thanksgiving time, and every penny is gone. And the rest of it is operations from there on. So, the number's probably close to $350 is what we spend on a pretty reliable basis. Seldom it's less.
Right.
Seldom it's less.
And if
Many years it's much greater, but those years are always going to be. You're never going to fully fund snow. That's just the reality. But is this the time to take that discussion from 150 to 300? Perhaps it is. But the number you've asked me to verify. It's close to 300,000 that is a safe position to be.
Right.
On
I
a
mean,
recurring basis.
it just means that the warrant committee doesn't have to scramble for that first 150 if it was funded at 300. Otherwise, you know, this year, it's going to be 300. We have to find that 150. We may have it, no problem, because we're not, you know, demolishing Hendry's or something, you know, but
So in the
other
budget,
years, we might not.
in the budget I've submitted,
Yeah.
it's the 150. It's exactly the same number. So I
Right.
just want to be clear on that.
No, I understand, and I'm thinking that, you know, and maybe it's time, I don't know when the 150 started.
You know what, I was
You
on the
know?
warrant committee about 23 years ago, and I think it was 150 then.
Right.
I'm not 100% sure, but that's ringing a bell, so I think it's been a long time.
It's been a long time, and it just,
In the 7 years that I've been here, salt's gone from $40 a ton to $67 a ton, one item alone.
right. So it just might be time that operating budget ought to be increased. You know, whether you request it or the warrant committee requests it, you know, just because it doesn't make sense to not see reality if it's in your face. Anyway, okay, so that's the question.
Helps you balance your budget, doesn't it?
How are we doing on your locker room facilities reconstruction? That last bit was authorized last spring.
Yep. Now with the final master plan in place, we know in fact what, you know, what needs to be done, and it's a good thing we waited, because as the committee decided to save certain buildings, what would have been meeting area, locker rooms, design-wise, got flipped, and would have been a waste of money. So we're probably 90% towards bid documents. What we're doing now, though, is value engineering, some of those things that we can do in-house. Maybe some demolition, maybe a lot of demolition, maybe some of the underground excavation, doing it on our own, because the budget cost is exceeding the funding that we have. Construction at $517,000, architectural services and bidding at $85,000, and
Oh, boy.
$50,000 for the roof. They don't, the Consolidated Facilities is looking at a roofing program for the entire town. They've kind of earmarked $50,000 to that, but is not going to be funded in this year. It's going to be a future year, so
Right.
their recommendation to me was include it in the project cost, at least as an add alternate. Whether, the building doesn't leak now, but, you know, putting $500,000 worth of improvements inside it with the original roof is always dicey. So, the information that I'm saying, though, is, you know, 560, call it 570, it's like 650,000, of which we have 450, you know, pledged to it. So we're trying to value engineering it down. It's already bare bones. I mean, we have VCT tiles, there's not a fleck of ceramic anywhere in the building, painted walls, suspended ceiling, pretty low end, hollow metal doors, so, you know, cheapening it up. The only thing that's extravagant is we have, in fact, heated and cooled it, and those guys aren't used to that because of their space now is neither heated nor cooled.
Oh, my God. All right.
Well,
Whatever you can do, be good to get it done.
Yeah, so value engineering, pull those things out that we can do, go out to the market, let's get the bids come in. I'm not about to ring any alarms until we know what the bids are. We may see some interesting surprises.
Great,
Yeah.
great. Okay, the last item on my list, I don't know if anybody else has any questions for Joe on his budgets. If we do have more questions, we'll let you know, like on the water
I
and
can
sewer and
come
the
back.
stormwater. Okay. But we have a new article for this spring's warrant, Safe Routes to Schools. Now, last year, we authorized the same thing for the Glover area, and I'm wondering, can you tell us how we doing on that?
So that's good. That project, we've done everything we've needed to do. We've secured the right-of-way. It's gotten construction authorization from DOT. Federal monies coming through to a municipality become a state project. It's their project. So their goal is to bid that, this spring, and hopefully as soon as the school bell rings for summer, they're out there in earnest, getting it done before school reopens
Good.
for that particular project. This article
Yeah.
that you're alluding to, I don't know where the nomenclature came from. I hear a tale of somebody sitting in a selectmen's meeting saying just like Safe Routes to School, and then somebody from the audience offering that this was Safe Routes to School. This is the East Milton Square project, period. It's the deck. It's that project that everybody's been talking about for as long as I've been around. It is a federal earmark, and because it's a federal earmark, it has to come through the TIP, Transportation Improvement Plan, which makes it a state project. Because of that, it's the same underwriting requirements similar to Safe Routes to School, where we have to secure right-of-way. This article is to simply only secure the right-of-way for that East Milton Square project. Tying the confusion to Safe Routes to School,
Okay.
I don't know where it came from.
So the titling is a problem.
It is.
Because I mean, the mechanism of securing the right-of-way may be exactly the same, and for the same combination of state and federal programs. Is that right?
It's only because,
Close,
of-
right.
it's only because of the source of the money. Simply put, is we have to secure the right of, we need to know where the temporary easements are, the permanent easements might be, and so on and so forth. And then knowing those, go out to those owners and physically secure them and issue an instrument to the Mass DOT that says, we have secured all of those things that we need.
Okay.
That's all this article should say. And I'm not sure how it got muddled up.
Okay, well, so...
Didn't come from us that
It
way.
needs to be retitled. It needs, it's easements for the
East
East
Milton
Milton
Square.
Deck Project.
Transportation Improvement Project,
Right.
whatever,
East Milton Square Reconstruction Federal Aid Project.
exactly the words.
Okay. Okay, so this is, in a way, it's a good sign because it sounds like something may finally happen. If you're going to go, if we're going to the trouble of securing easements for the
One more
neighboring
step
drives.
on a-
Okay.
On a huge journey.
The long and winding road.
So when we did it for the Glover School area, there was a lot of question about what is this going to cost? And we don't know what it's going to cost, but the cost of securing easements is minimal. You have to offer the property owners something for losing the use of their driveway for a day, that kind of thing. These are all temporary easements, right?
That's, on the Glover School, there were 2 permanent easements, but they were both on
Right,
town
but they're
property.
town property. What about this?
Unknown. Till the design moves forward,
Okay.
which will happen sometime during FY17. We don't know what it's going to entail, whether it's going to be, affecting storefronts, maybe door thresholds. We don't know yet. We think that it's negligible. We don't know. All we know is that the project, as it moves forward, tells us that we have to secure right away, and it's likely to have to happen during the next fiscal year. And this article authorizes us to pursue that.
But it's an easement. It's not, nobody's trying to take over,
No
the
one's taking
East
land.
Milton liquor store or anything like that.
There's no residential area around there that you would think would
Hollis
have the
Street.
impact, because that would be.
One.
Get the time. By the time we get the town meeting.
That's where the hell report's going.
Yeah.
But at any rate,
Plain noise, huh?
if there is a property owner somewhere that needs to be compensated for a temporary or permanent easement, those funds can be taken out of Chapter 90
They're
revenues?
eligible.
They're eligible?
Eligible,
Okay.
and we'd have to determine whether that's the appropriate location to take them from or not. Every penny we take out of Chapter 90 is a penny we take out of a roadway.
Right. But otherwise, it's got to come from somewhere.
That's correct. And it cannot come
federal
from
project.
And it cannot come from the federal earmark.
Can't come from the federal earmark, and it can't, and unless you know the amount of money, where is it going to come from, other than coming to the warrant committee for reserve fund transfer to pay it,
Yeah, so,
right?
so the reality, the logistics and the reality of those logistics are, as this project evolves over the next fiscal year, this project is going to proceed to the point that we're gonna have to secure right-of-way. An abstract concept right now, but we have to do that. This article allows us to pursue that. So as we pursue that, we're going to identify what areas are temporary, what areas might be permanent, and then need to proceed down that appraisal process accordingly and reach agreements with each of those folks for funds. And as we know what those funds are, there's going to need to be a decision reached, whether it's out of Chapter 90 or some other source, and have to come back for a separate request. If it's Chapter 90, that appropriation that we just did for the, was it 900, whatever it was, 622,978, some of that money could be used.
Okay, but we're talking a small amount of money, right? Because what was the tab for the Glover area? Do you have it?
30,000
30,000, okay. The tab for...
to leverage $1 million project.
Right. The tab for the East Milton area is who knows what, right? But there were a lot more
The reality
individual
is,
owners.
in the business district, the right-of-way is already the storefronts. So short of
Right,
getting into their building, what could we possibly be doing?
right. So my feeling is the cost will be minimal,
I would hope.
okay? My feeling is that putting it out against Chapter 90 would be great, and that therefore, we could easily recommend supporting this article with the same clause at the end of it, so that people won't get too excited at town meeting, that the town vote no appropriation under this article. Because the article says, blah, 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 to see if we'll vote to do this, and further to see what sum of money the town will appropriate for the purposes of this article, and to determine whether such appropriation shall be raised by transfer from available funds, by borrowing under applicable provisions of law, or otherwise, and to act on anything related thereto. If we vote no appropriation under this article, it still means you can pay for those costs out of Chapter 90 money. That was my understanding when we did it a year ago.
It's because, the answer is you're right and wrong. It's only because the Chapter 90 authorization also appropriates the sum, so that appropriation is already made.
Right.
If I spend it from any other source, we do need an appropriation. So basically, that language says, until you have an appropriation,
Can't.
all you have is Chapter 90, all you need to come back.
Right.
That's what that says.
Okay. I don't have a problem with that. Because if you don't say something like this that limits it, you'll never get it past town meeting,
Right, especially if you don't know the number.
right?
The only
And you're not going to
caution-
know the number come spring,
Absolutely not. No, way premature.
Right?
The
So-
engineering hasn't evolved to that point yet.
so if we don't put in this limiting qualifier to take the money issue off the table and say, look, we don't know what it's going to be, it's going to come out of Chapter 90, it might be 10 grand, it might be 40 grand, we don't know yet.
So
You'll
my
never-
only word of caution on that is, I remember as we went through the rubber process, where the impacts were known, and we had a general idea of what it might be worth. The language is prescribed language from SDOT. So if this doesn't alter the prescribed language, I think we're okay.
Well,
If it does alter the prescribed language, it doesn't accomplish what it needs to in the end, which is to get the project advanced. So I need to verify the language. I need to get a
Well-
copy of that.
the prescribed language is all the stuff that comes before. Because once you get to this semicolon in the article, it's the same old boilerplate you see on every article that comes down the pike that may or may not want money. It says, and further, to see what sum of money the town will appropriate for the purposes of this article. You know? So sure, I mean, I guess we should check it out. don't want to vote anything that's,
But is the recommendation, again,
the recommendation,
it undoes
the
some of that language.
recommendation says, well, the article says, geez, and let's see what sum of money. Well, we don't know what sum of money, so we can't do that anyway, okay? So if you can't do that anyway, the best thing to do is say no sum of money, all right? And, you know, especially because we know there's a small cost and it can be paid for through Chapter 90 funds, or is eligible to be paid by Chapter 90 revenue. It didn't seem to be an issue a year ago, so I don't know why it would be an issue now.
The recommendation, as I'm seeing on the screen there, is what was formulated, obviously it's changing street names,
Exactly, if,
for safe routes to school. And the ultimate vote was that no appropriation be made under
and
this.
further, that the town vote no appropriation of this article. That was the language that I wrote and was approved by John Flynn.
I think we should go for that language.
I'd say let's go for it, because if Mass dot,
I mean, we'll
Satisfied, they
send
should be
it back
still
out.
satisfied.
We'll send it back out, and if we need to
sometimes
revote
I'm
it,
afraid of asking the question, if
We'll
it
revote it.
voted, if that's what came out.
this comes back, then we got a problem with Glover.
Comes back in October. Okay, right, if this comes, I don't even want
If
to
this
ask
is a
that.
problem, if this is a problem, it's the same as Glover, then we have a problem.
I'm okay with it.
I move that
I'm
we,
more confident.
Approve this article as written with no appropriation.
I'll second that.
Okay, and I just want to make the observation before we vote that we will pursue having this retitled, this article.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, because it makes no sense to have the schools in it. Okay, all in favor? Awesome,
Thank you.
thank you. Joe, I think that covers everything.
Yay.
One last thing, Joe, and this is something that we talked about a little at Capitol, and I said I would bring it up here because you'll have a microphone and an audience. Lead in drinking water and why that's not a huge problem for Milton, and that MWRA has website information. Just Google MWRA and lead in water, and there's plenty to read there. But I had specifically asked Joe if
Sure.
replacing lead service connections might be something we would have to do.
So, I think it was last Friday, the Boston Globe found it in their heart to write a story about Flint, Michigan, which landed directly and squarely in the laps of the town of Milton, in so much as they were talking about how we made great inroads with the lead and copper situation in all of Massachusetts, particularly the MWRA systems, and that there were only a couple of communities that had positive hits for lead. Milton specifically listed, and we were. One test out of the 22 that we do, the test is designed to fail. We do these every single year, and we are in full compliance. Now, what this really boils down to for the folks at home is don't be alarmed. The water doesn't have lead. The water has a certain level of corrosivity in it that, as it flows through pipes and plumbing fixtures, can pick lead up through contact, extended contact. It's temperature dependent, so hot water is more inclined to pick up lead as does cold water. So the reality is, we know for a fact we have no lead water mains in our town. We have no lead water services. Those are the longer lengths of pipe, in the streets and going up to the property line. Go ahead.
I had to replace a lead service line to my house 3 years ago.
How many years ago?
2 years ago?
2 years ago. And I was just going to say, and there are about 40,
Year and a half ago.
there were about, not on the street, but from the shut-off box into your house.
From the shut-off
which-
box into the
Which is
house, yes.
which is the private homeowner's responsibility. And
Okay.
our records indicate that there's about 40 of those such services across the entire service area of our town.
Congratulations.
Hey,
And
39
jackpot.
now.
39
I'm not
now.
sure. If it was a year and a half ago, it's probably 40, and it was 41. But all that aside, that's still not an indication that you've got a problem or not. But the best precaution is, first and foremost, make a call to our department, and we can look up your record and hopefully give you some guidance of what you have for piping on your side of the property. Regardless of whether you have a service or not, you still have lead solder on your copper pipes. You might, though rare, you might have some lead piping inside the house itself. And all those more ornate fixtures, your brass fixtures and your gold-plated fixtures, and some of the pewter stuff is got lead in it. So even with all of that lead being there, the best thing you can do is when you get up in the morning, don't pour yourself a glass of water and drink it right down. Run it for 5 seconds. Take a glass of water and drink it right down. It's the contact time, and again, it's hot water versus cold. So if you are cooking with water, boiling something, or using water as an ingredient, use cold water, don't use hot water, and same principle, just run it for a few seconds before you use it, and that's if you just want to use an abundance of caution. You could always go out and have your water analyzed, but the sampling protocols need to be adhered to, and you might get false positives, which may be cause for alarm. But the reality is that it doesn't affect adults. It's young children and infants. My understanding, and I need to verify this, and I've been trying to the past couple of days, is even pregnant women, that lead doesn't pass the placenta. That it just affects the adult, and the adult tolerance is pretty great. Lead naturally exists. It's in the air, it's in the soils, it's in the water, it's in things we come in contact with on a regular basis. We're very confident that, one, we're in compliance, and two, that there's not any reason for alarm in the community. But those folks who have water services that, much as yourself, I'm going to guess, but you probably spent between $3,000 and $5,000 to replace your water service.
That's right.
And that was a great caution. It was probably not a bad thing to do, but it probably also wasn't necessary. But people make decisions that are
Well,
appropriate.
lead is a little bit fragile, a little brittle. Anything happens to that lead,
Leaks.
Lead into your basement, and you'll have a swimming pool before you know it.
Right, when it lets go suddenly.
Yeah.
And it's not just localized, usually it's the whole thing is deteriorating. So yeah, where you may not have been replacing it as a concern for health, it was as a concern for reliability in your service, and in the same token, you just got a newer pipe that was healthier too.
Thanks, Joe.
Wow.
So we've also included the link to the MWRA documentation on our website as well. We are not Flint, Michigan by any stretch. What happened out there, I dare say, is going to come out in the courts is down close to criminal.
Oh, it was criminal.
Was.
And
I'm sure, I'm
Look at things
convinced.
that's about it.
yeah, I mean, in the interest of saving money, they went to a vulnerable water supply that in itself had contamination. And
Well,
we do
and
not have
then
that
they
problem.
didn't treat it properly. They didn't put the
chemicals
coating
in.
agent.
Yeah.
So,
Be saving money in the end.
no, we are very fortunate to have the quality of drinking water that we do. We are, it's, anytime you travel anywhere else in the country, have a sip of their water, Milton's tastes better. And it's great water. It's great water. So Joe, thanks for coming in,
coming in.
spending your
Appreciate that.
night with us.
Night wouldn't be complete without a 30-second beer story. The water in the MWRA is so good that when Stan Adams opened the bottling plant in Pennsylvania, they matched the water chemistry in Pennsylvania to the MWRA system.
Wow.
Nice.
That's why
Wow.
the beer tastes the same
Nice.
everywhere.
All right. Okay, time for a beer. I don't think there's anything else on the agenda. I hope not.
We're good. Let's make the arrangements.
Scheduling.
There's a does anybody have any questions on the
Adjourn?
schedule that you got from Lee Michael? It looks a little compact. There is a little bit of time after the warrant goes to the printer. There's about a week's worth of downtime, and then it comes back, and then you might be asked to, look at it again. Anybody wants to write a comment, start thinking about that, because there's about 45 of them.
You also have with me this evening?
You want to write a comment for the
Be a story, that would be.
That'd be great.
Good night.
Joe, thank you
Good
so
night,
much.
thank you.
Okay. Okay, so obviously, if you have any questions about schedule, send them to me, Michael, or send them to me, and we'll hope that Lee Michael's back on his feet soon. We have a meeting next Wednesday.
Motion to adjourn?
Second,
All in favor?
let's get out of here.
Great, thank you.
Sunday nights when I'm sitting downstairs, having to look at stuff on the computers. So this is what I kind of take a look.